I'm making. I'll tell you. Yes, Anil. Yeah.
Good morning. So today, yeah, hi, good morning, Anjali.
Good morning, Anilji.
So just we are going to start the new book. So today we are going to start our new book, book number 32, The Ultimate Gift by Jim Stovall. So this book is about the life journey, how one can transform his life. So here the author tells the story how a person who who is the Red Stephen, who has died and left his complete wealth. He was the billionaire and he left his wealth. And after leaving, he wrote his will. In his will, he has distributed all his wealth to his relatives and family members, except his grandson Jason Stephen, who is basically whom he thinks that he see himself, he see that he can do better in the life. So he has not given any money or any property from his wealth, but he has left one gift for him and his friend, that the lawyer who has written the will, he will give him the ultimate gift if he completes the certain 12 tasks in the coming 1 year. So this is the journey how just that Jason Steven will transform his life as per the guidance of his grandfather. Here, the author claims when you will read the last page of this book, the reader will be the complete different person that we are currently. So, this is the claim that author is making. And when we go for a journey or wonderful trip with our family members, we recollect those memories, we keep those memories. So like that, this book is that memory, and this will be a trip that we will go, and that will change the, and we will learn many things while reading this book. Even though this is a small book, 85 pages book, but it have many things to learn, how just one can change his life and can improve. So we can start. I will present the screen and then we can start reading this book. So whoever wants to read, he can type his name in the group, and then I can hand over. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Yeah, yeah.
Anilji, the PDF is not shared in the group, or is it?
Sorry, I missed that. So uh, I think Rajesh ji, you can share.
Yes, yeah, Rajesh, you do that, no?
Yeah, I think you can share. Then I will just projecting here for reading
Yes,
now.
yes, fine.
So introduction I am skipping. So I just given the introduction of this book. So we will start with this phase one. In the beginning, a journey may be long or short, but it must start at the very spot one finds oneself. It was in my 53rd year of practicing law, my 18th year of life here on this earth, that I was to undertake an odyssey that would change my life forever. I was seated behind my mahogany monstrosity of a desk in my top floor corner office of an imposing building in the most prominent section of Boston. In the marble foyer, the antique brass plate on the outer door reads Hamilton. Hamilton and Hamilton. Of the aforementioned, I am the first Hamilton, Theodore J. Hamilton. To be accurate, my son and grandson account for the remainder of the Hamilton in the firm. I would not say that we are the most prestigious law firm in all of the Boston because that would not be totally circumspect. However, if someone else were to say that, I would not go out of my way to disagree, as I was simply drinking in the ambience in my antiquated but palatial office. I was thinking how far I had come since the lean days in law school. I enjoyed gazing upon my wall of frame, which includes photographs taken of me with the last five presidents of the United States, among other significant persons. I glanced at the familiar sight of floor to ceiling shelves of leather bound books, the massive oriental rug, and the classical leather furniture, all of which predate me. My enjoyment in simply experiencing the familiar environment was interrupted when the telephone on my desk buzzed. I heard the reliable and familiar voice of Margaret Hastings. Sir, she said, may I step in and have a word with you? As we had been working together for more than 40 years, I knew that tone was reserved for the most serious and sober of circumstances. Come in, please, I replied immediately. Miss Hastings entered promptly, securing the door behind her and sat across the desk from me. She had not brought her calendar, her correspondence, documents of any type. I was trying to remember the last time Margaret has entered my inner sanctum without some baggage. When she said without preamble or delay, Mr. Hamilton, Red Stevens just died. When you get to be an octogenarian, you grow as accustomed as one can to losing friend and family. But some of the losses hit you harder than others. This one shook me to my core amid all of the emotions and memories that flooded over me. I realized that I would have to do what Red would expect of me, which was simply to do my job. I shifted into my lawyer mode and told Miss Hastings, we will need to connect all of the family members, the various corporate boards, and the business interest, and be ready to control the media circus that will begin any minute. Miss Hastings stood up and said, I will handle everything. She quickly walked to the door and then hesitated a moment. After an uncomfortable pause, during which I realized Margrethe Hastings and I were crossing that line that divides professional and personal. She said quickly, Mr. Hamilton, I am sorry for your loss. Miss Hastings closed the door and left me alone with my thoughts. 2 weeks later, I found myself at the head of massive conference table with all of the Red Stevens' various relatives gathered around. The feeling of anticipation, bordering on greed, was almost a physical presence in the room. Knowing Red's feeling towards the majority of relatives, I knew he would want me to prolong their misery as long as possible. Therefore, I had Margarete offer everyone coffee, tea, and soft drink, along with anything else she could think. I scanned and rescanned the voluminous documents before me and cleared my throat multiple times, finally realizing that I was stretching the bounds of propriety. I rose to my feet and addressed the motley assemblage. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we are here to read the last will and testament of Howard Red Stevens. I realize that this is difficult time for all of us, that our personal loss individually for outweigh any legal or financial concerns we might have this morning. I knew that whatever he was, Red would enjoy the irony. I will dispense with the preliminary and the boilerplate and the legalese and will go directly to the issues at hand. Red Stevens was a very successful man in every sense of that word. He bequests are much as Red as was himself, very simple and straightforward. Uh, who wants to go next?
Yes, I may start.
Yes.
I drew up this revised will for Mr. Stevens just over a year ago on his 75th birthday. I know from our subsequent conversations that this document does indeed reflect his final wishes. I will read directly from his will, and you will realize as I read that while this document is totally legal and binding, some of the passages are in Red's own words. To my eldest son, Jack Stevens, I leave my first company, Panhandle Oil and Gas. At the writing of this will, Panhandle's worth is somewhere in the neighborhood of $600 million. Several gasps could be heard from around the table, along with one prolonged, audible squeal of glee. I set the document down on the edge of the table and looked over the top of my reading glasses with my most intimidating courtroom stare. After a significant pause, I picked up the will and continued. Although Jack will be the sole owner of the company, its management and operations will be left in the hands of Panhandle's board of directors, which has served me so well over so many years. Jack, I want you to know that since you didn't have any interest in the company when I was living, I figured you would not have any interest now that I am gone. And letting you control something like Panhandle would be like giving a 3-year-old a loaded gun. I want you to know that I have instructed Mr. Hamilton to write this will in such a way that if you fight for control or hinder the board or even complain about the nature of my bequest to you, the entire ownership of Panhandle Oil and Gas will immediately go to charity. I looked up from the will and stared at Jack Stevens. The entire range of possible emotions was displayed on his face. Jack Stevens was a 57-year-old playboy who had never known the privilege of earning a day's wages. He had no idea of the favor his father had done him by taking the control of Panhandle Oil and Gas out of his hands. I knew he was feeling that this was just one more time when he failed to live up to his illustrious father's expectations. I actually felt some pity for Jack as I explained, Mr. Stevens, the will does direct that each bequest be read in order and that the parties be dismissed after the portion of the document pertaining to them has been read. He looked at me with a confused expression on his countenance and said, "What?" Next page. At that point, always vigilant Miss Hastings took his arm and said, "Mr. Stevens, I'll escort you to the door." When everyone had settled back into their chairs and the level of the anticipation had again risen to a fever pitch, I continued. To my only daughter Ruth, I leave the family home and ranch in Austin, Texas, along with all working cattle operations. Ruth was seated at the far end of the table with her dubious husband and offspring. Even at that distance, the sound of her hands slapping together and greedily rubbing back and forth could be heard. She and her family were so self absorbed that I do not believe they understood the fact that the entire operation would be managed for them and that they would be kept at arm's length where they could not hurt themselves or anyone else. Miss Hastings promptly showed them from the room. I cleared my throat and continued. To my youngest son and only other remaining child, Bill, I leave the entire holdings of my stock, bond, and investment portfolio. However, Bill, this portfolio will be left in the hands of Mr. Hamilton and his firm to be managed in trust for you and your heirs so that there will be something left to divide when somebody is reading your will someday. The room continued to clear as each of the more distant relatives received their eagerly awaited windfall. Finally, there was but one lone occupant of the room remaining with Miss Hastings and me. I looked down the table at young Jason Stevens, the 24-year-old great nephew of my longtime friend Red Stevens. He glared back at me with a look of rage, defiance, and disrespect that only someone who has made a lifelong practice of selfish anger can muster. He slammed his hand on the table and yelled at me. I knew that mean old man would not leave anything for me. He always hated me. He stood and began to stalk out of the room. Not so fast, I called to him. You are indeed mentioned here in the will. He slid back into his chair and stared toward me, stone faced, not wanting to signal the hope he felt. I returned his cold stare, determined not to speak until he did. Patience comes only to those of us who have seen 80 birthdays. Finally, when he could stand it no longer, he said, Okay, what did the old goat give me? As I sat down and reached for the document, I heard young Jason Stevens mutter, I bet it is nothing. I sat back in my chair and smiled at him as I said, Young man, it is indeed nothing and everything both at the same time. Chapter 2, A Voice from the Past. In the end, a person is only known by the impact he or she has on others. Jason Stevens and I sat in silence as Miss Hastings left the room and quickly returned with a large cardboard box. She set the box next to me at the end of the table and took her customary place on my right. I turned to Jason and said, Young man, this box was given to me by your great uncle Red Stevens on the day he prepared his last will and testament. The box was sealed at that time and has been kept in our vault per Mr. Stevens' instructions until today. As you can plainly see, the seal is still intact. There are very specific and detailed instructions as to how I am to administer this gift to you. I broke open the seal, reached inside the box, and took out a videotape. I handed it to Miss Hastings, and she put the tape in the video player contained in a built-in console at the end of the conference room. She sat down next to me, holding the remote control. Jason Stevens blurted out, What is going on here? Everyone else walks out with millions of dollars, and I get some kind of home movie? I tried to ignore his smug attitude and replied, I think it will all become clear to you shortly. I nodded to Miss Hastings. She dimmed the lights and started the video. After some brief static, the image of 75-year-old Red Stevens appeared on the screen. Red Stevens was a big man in every sense of that word. He had come to Texas out of the swamps of Louisiana with nothing but determination, strength, and the clothes on his back, and during the Depression and war years had built an oil and cattle empire that rivaled any in the world. He was the kind of man who dominated every situation in which he was involved. Even now, with just his video image on the large screen at the end of the conference room. I could feel the energy level in the room climbing. Yeah, Anjali, you want to read?
Yes, Suman. Yeah, thank you. Red Stevens cleared his throat and began to speak. Well, Jason, since you are watching this videotape, we will assume that I have kicked the bucket, bit the dust, bought the farm, and gone on to my just rewards. I know that my instructions have been followed to the letter, so you are viewing this video with my oldest and dearest friend. Theodore, Theodore Hamilton and his trusted associate, Margaret Hastings. Son, you don't know enough to realize it, but these are two of the finest people to ever walk God's green earth. Red paused for a minute and then spoke directly to Margaret and me using a derivative of my name that only Red Stevens was allowed to use. Ted, I want to thank both of you and Margaret for dealing with all of my in laws, outlaws, and assorted misfit relatives earlier today. I know that none of them will win any prizes. I also want to apologize to both of you for the sorry attitude that I am sure Jason has already displayed during these proceedings. Red paused for another brief moment, cleared his throat, and began again. Jason, I lived my life in a big way. I had a lot of big accomplishments, and I made a lot of big mistakes. One of the biggest mistakes I ever made was when I gave everyone in our family everything that they thought they ever wanted. It took me many years to figure out Mm. that everything we ever do or know or have in this life is a gift from the good Lord. He has a special plan for each of us, and He has provided everything we need to fulfill that plan. I spent many years trying to achieve happiness or buy it for friends and family. Only as an old man did, I come to learn that all happiness comes from the gifts that God has given us. Unfortunately, the money and possessions I spread around didn't help people to understand the gifts that have been provided for us. In trying to make up for all the times I wasn't there, I gave them all material things. In doing so, I robbed them of everything that makes life wonderful. Gratefully, I also discovered God is merciful, and I believe I have made peace within regarding my shortcomings. However, I think my family members are all permanently ruined. It's like when a horse goes bad, you simply have to take him out and shoot him. Unfortunately, as my lawyer, Mr. Hamilton, advised me, shooting our entire family would be frowned. Would you please scroll? Would be frowned upon. He also rightly reminded me that God never gives up on people. Therefore, I leave my family in God's hands, and I have taken steps in my will to provide a living for all of these relatives, even if they will never experience life. You, on the other hand, Jason, may be the last great vestige of hope in our family. Although your life to date seems to be a sorry excuse for anything I would call promising. There does seem to be some spark of something in you. I'm hoping we can capture and fan into a flame. For that reason, I am not making you an instant millionaire for the rest of your life. Jason slammed his open palm onto the conference table and began to speak, but was interrupted by Red Stevens' words from the videotape. Now, Jason, before you mouth off and embarrass both you and me in front of these fine people, let me explain the ground rules here. On the first of each month for the next year, you will meet with Mr. Hamilton and Miss Hastings and be given one element of what I call the ultimate gift. If you stay the course over the next year the and embrace each element, at that point, you will be the recipient of the most significant bequest. I can leave you through my will. But understand, if at any time you do not perform as indicated, or if you give Mr. Hamilton or Miss Hastings an undue amount of difficulty, I have instructed Mr. Hamilton through my will to stop the process and leave you with nothing. I heard a deep sigh and exhalation of breath from the direction of Jason Stevens. Red continued, "Now, don't forget, boy, if you turn out to be more trouble than you are worth, which is not difficult for you, Mr. Hamilton will simply cut you off without another word. And finally, to you, Theodore J. Hamilton." Red chuckled and continued, "I bet you didn't think I remembered your real name. Ted, I want to thank you for undertaking this little salvage operation on my behalf with Jason. And I also want to thank you for being the best friend that any man can ever had. I accumulated a lot of things in my life, but I would trade them all in an instant for the privilege I have of sitting here right now and being able to say that Theodore J. Hamilton was my friend." At that point, the video ended and we all sat in silence. Finally, Jason turned to me and in a belligerent tone said, "That old man was crazy." I sighed and replied, "Well, young man, it is certain that someone is crazy, and I think this little project is going to give us all the opportunity to find out who that someone may be." I stood and offered my hand to Jason as I moved towards the door. He ignored my outstretched hand and said, "Wait a minute. What's the deal here? Why don't you just tell me what's going on and what I get?" "All in good time, young man," I said to him over my shoulder as I walked out of the room. I could hear Jason's angry voice as I retreated down the hall. Why couldn't he just leave me money like everybody else? I could hear the calm voice of Miss Hastings reply, "He loved you too much to do that." Chapter 3, The Gift of Work. He who loves his work never labors. I must say, I was rather anxious during the ensuing weeks and very relieving when the first day of the next month rolled around. I was sitting in my office working on other matters, trying to keep my mind occupied and off of the fact that Jason Stevens would be arriving shortly. Finally, the buzzer on my telephone sounded, and Miss Hastings informed me that young Jason Stevens had arrived and was waiting in the conference room. I collected the appropriate files while Miss Hastings retrieved Red Stevens' box from the vault. When we entered the conference room, we found Jason slumped back in a chair with his feet up on the conference table. I strode across the room and slid the box that Margaret had handed me onto the table in such a way as to knock Jason's feet off of it. "Good morning, Jason," I said. "I'm glad that you found a chair and are making yourself comfortable. Some people never have learned the proper use of furniture." Jason dismissed my comment with a bored wave and replied, "Can we just get on with it here? I've got things to do and people to see." I laughed aloud as I sat down and said, "Young man, I do anticipate you will have things to do and people to see, but it may not be exactly as you think." I took another videotape from the box and handed it to Margaret. She placed it in the video player, and in a few moments, Red Stevens appeared on the large screen. He said, "Good morning, Ted, and to you, Miss Hastings. Once again, I want to thank you for undertaking this little chore, and Jason, and I want to remind you of the rules. If at any time during the next 12 months you do not perform as called for, or if Mr. Hamilton does not approve of your attitude and demeanor, he will simply stop the process and cut you off from my ultimate gift to you. I will warn you about Mr. Hamilton. He may appear very patient and long suffering, but, young man, if you push him too far, you will find that you have let an angry tiger out of its cage." Jason looked at me with a bewildered expression on his face. I simply stared back at him. Someone
Thank
else
you.
wants to read from here? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, just a minute. Okay. Red paused and seemed to be remembering days gone by. "Jason, when I was much younger than you are now," he continued, "I learned the satisfaction that comes from a simple 4-letter word, work.
One of the things my wealth has robbed from you and the entire family is the privilege and satisfaction that comes from doing an honest day's work. I could see Jason rolling his eyes as he let out a deep sigh. Now, before you go off the deep end and reject everything I'm going to tell you, Red continued, I want you to realize that work has brought me everything I have and everything that you have. I regret that I have taken from you the joy of knowing what you have is what you have earned. My earliest memories in the swamps of Louisiana are of work, hard, back-breaking labor that as a young man I resented greatly. My parents had too many mouths to feed and not enough food, so if we wanted to eat, we worked. Later, when I was on my own and came to Texas, I realized that hard work had become a habit for me, and it has served as a true joy for all the rest of my life. Jason, you've enjoyed the best things that this world has to offer. You have been everywhere, seen everything, and done everything. What you don't understand is how much pleasure these things can bring you when you have earned them yourself, when leisure becomes a reward for hard work instead of a way to avoid work. Tomorrow morning, you're going to take a little trip with Mr. Hamilton and Miss Hastings. You will be going to meet an old friend of mine on a ranch outside of Alpine, Texas. When I was young and struggling to stay alive during the Depression, I met Gus Caldwell. We learned the power of hard work then, and today there's no one better to teach you this lesson than Gus. I have already prepared a letter outlining this entire situation to be sent to Gus Caldwell. Mr. Hamilton has forwarded that letter to Alpine, Texas, and Gus Caldwell will be expecting you. Please remember, if at any time you do not complete the activities outlined in my will, or if Mr. Hamilton is not pleased with your attitude, this endeavor will simply end, and you will forego the ultimate gift. The screen went black. This is ridiculous, Jason shot at me angrily. I smiled and replied, yes, dealing with you can be trying, but there are some things you just do for friends like Red Stevens. I will see you at the airport at 6:45 in the morning. Jason looked at me as if he were addressing an imbecile. Didn't they have any flights later in the day? He asked. I replied with more patience than I felt. Yes, but Mr. Caldwell, I think you will find, is not one who wants to waste any time. Sorry. See you tomorrow. Jason left our office, and Miss Hastings made all of the necessary arrangements. The next morning, just as the airline attendant was preparing to close the door, a bleary eyed Jason Stevens came running down the concourse. Miss Hastings handed the attendant the tickets for the three of us, and we boarded the plane. Miss Hastings and I took our assigned seats, which were the first two on the right side of the aircraft in the first class section. Jason stood there with a confused expression on his face as there were no more seats in the first class cabin. He turned to me and asked, where's my seat? Miss Hastings responded to his question using her most efficient tone, but I knew she was enjoying every moment of it when she said, oh, Mr. Stevens, you've been assigned seat 23F. She handed Jason his ticket stub and he stormed down the aisle toward the coach seating. When we got off the plane at the Midland Odessa airport. Gus Caldwell was there to meet us. I had known Gus for years as a friend and associate of Red Stevens. We shared a mutual love of a lifetime friend. Gus shook my hand warmly with the calloused grip of a man of 35 instead of what I knew must be his real age of 75. He greeted Miss Hastings politely, but was somewhat gruff with Jason. He said to him, Red Stevens was one of the best men I ever met. I don't see how you're going to live up to that. As Jason was preparing to protest this cold greeting, Gus shot back at him. Son, why don't you go downstairs and see if you can find the luggage? Make yourself useful. A few moments later, we were downstairs in the airport, and Jason had indeed located all of the luggage. Gus pulled around the parking lot to pick us up at the door in his deluxe pickup truck, a vehicle we rarely see in Boston. Gus held the door for Miss Hastings and me and said to Jason, Well, don't just stand there, boy. Get these bags in the truck. Jason loaded all of the luggage in the back of the pickup truck and then asked sheepishly, Where am I supposed to sit? You can ride in the back or walk, Gus said. It's all the same to me. Gus got in and began to pull away just as Jason scrambled into the bed of the pickup truck. I glanced back and saw him sprawled out among the luggage, rolling from side to side as Gus summarily ignored all of the speed limit signs as we left the airport complex. During the ride out of the Gus sprawling ranch, with Jason out of earshot, we discussed memories of Red and a desire to help Red redeem Jason Stevens. We agreed that Gus would spend the next 4 weeks communicating his version of the work ethic to Jason, while Miss Hastings and I would leave the following day and spend several weeks in Austin, where I was to do some legislative work for another client. After traversing what seemed to be an endless gravel road, we turned into a driveway that led off into the distance. A sign read, Gus Caldwell Ranch. Friends are welcome, trespassers will be shot. After another 10-minute drive, we arrived at a huge ranch house where we were greeted by Gus' extended family, several of his workers, and a number of dogs. Gus led Miss Hastings and me into his comfortable home and yelled back at Jason's, Don't just lie there in the truck, boy. Get the bags. Gus had informed Miss Hastings and me that the next day would start early at the Caldwell Ranch. He decided to let Jason find out the hard way. The next morning, Miss Hastings and I and all of the Caldwell family enjoyed a huge breakfast of monumental cholesterol before 6 a.m. As we were enjoying our second cup of coffee, Gus said, Well, I better go get Sleeping Beauty. This is going to be an interesting day. Real educational, if you know what I mean. We could hear Gus climbing the stairs and banging open the door to Jason's room. He called out in a thunderous voice, Boy, are you alive? You're sleeping through the whole day here. Get dressed and get downstairs. Gus rejoined us as we chatted amiably over the strong coffee, and a few minutes later, a disheveled, sleepy eyed Jason joined us. He sat down at the table. No sooner was he seated than Gus rose and said, Well, that was a good breakfast. Time to get to work. Um, Would somebody else like to read, or should I go on?
I think let me see how much is left in this chapter. I think 2 more pages are there. Who want to go next?
Okay, should I continue?
Yeah, please
Yes, you can.
continue.
You can. Yes, yes.
Okay, Jason glared at him and said belligerently, "Can I have some breakfast, please?" Gus smiled and said, "Yes, sir, first thing tomorrow morning." Nobody ever leaves Gus Calwell's home hungry, but there's not much I can do if people are going to sleep all day. Jason looked out the window and exclaimed, "It's not even daylight yet." Gus chuckled and replied, "That's very observant, son. I thought I was going to have to teach you everything. Now, get out to the bunkhouse and see if you can find some work clothes. That's about the most worthless get up you have on there I've ever seen. We'll be leaving in about 5 minutes." Gus agreed to take Miss Hastings and me out to where Jason would be working to see him get started before we left for Austin. We were seated in the truck when Jason stumbled out of the bunkhouse and dutifully climbed into the back of the pickup truck. Before he was seated, Gus shot out across the yard and drove through a gate, bouncing out across an immense field. Just as the sun was rising, Gus stopped at a remote corner of the ranch where a huge pile of fence posts lay on the ground. Gus jumped out of the truck and yelled, "Boy, would you get out of that pickup bed? I have never seen one for lying around like you." Miss Hastings and I followed Gus and Jason to the last fence post standing in a long line that stretched out of sight. "Welcome to Fence Post 101," Gus proclaimed proudly. He quickly showed Jason how to dig a post hole, set the post, and string the wire in a straight line. Even at 75, Gus Caldwell showed immense strength and incredible stamina. He made everything look easy. He turned to Jason and said, "Now you try." And Gus joined Miss Hastings and me near the truck. Jason stumbled through the process almost comically, and Gus called out, "Well, hopefully you'll get the hang of it before you beat yourself to death. Somebody will come by to pick you up for the noon meal." Jason seemed alarmed and called out, "How far is this fence supposed to go?" As Gus helped Miss Hastings and me into the truck. Gus laughed and said, "No more than a mile, and then we'll turn and go the other way. Don't worry, we won't run out of things for you to do. I wish I had $1 for every post hole good old Red Stevens and I dug all across Texas." We left Jason there to his labors. Almost 4 weeks later, Miss Hastings and I returned from a successful trip to the Texas state capital in Austin. Gus once again picked us up at the airport, and as we were driving to his ranch, I couldn't help but ask, "Well, how is young Jason getting along?" Gus chuckled and said, "I wasn't sure he was going to make it. Between the sunburn, blisters, and heat exhaustion, it was a close thing. But I think you are in for a pleasant surprise." When we reached the ranch, Gus drove us directly to the field where Jason had been working the first day. I noticed that the fence extended far beyond its original point, and Jason was nowhere in sight. Gus drove on a distance, and once we crested a short rise, I spotted Jason in the distance. An amazing transformation had taken place. Jason was browned by the sun, lean from his physical labor, and working steadily as we arrived. He waved to us and walked over to join us as we got out of the truck. Jason, did you dig all of those post holes and set all of those posts yourself? I asked. He seemed to have a gleam in his eye and he answered, Yes, sir, every one of them, and they are straight too. Gus put his arm around Jason's shoulder and said, Son, I wasn't sure you were going to make it, but you turned into a really good hand. Your great uncle Red and I discovered nearly 60 years ago that if you can do this kind of work with pride and quality, then you can do anything. I think you have learned your lesson, and now it's time to get you back to Boston. I was shocked when Jason replied, I only have a few more to finish up this section. Why don't we leave in the morning? The next day after breakfast, Gus volunteered to drive us to the airport. Jason dutifully carried the bags out onto the porch, but instead of his pickup truck, Gus was driving a new Cadillac. Jason laughed and asked, Where's your truck, Mr. Caldwell? Gus smiled and replied, I can't have one of my best hands rolling around in the back of the truck with the luggage. Now let's get you to the airport. As we flew 30,000 feet above middle America, I couldn't help but think of Red Stevens and the lesson on work he had taught Jason. I hoped the lesson meant as much to Jason as it did to me.
Thank you. I think we will conclude the today's reading here. So three chapters we have completed. So that this way that the Red Stevens has inherited his will, and now that the Jason who has completed his first activity project. So that way the on the work how just the he's going he's learning his that how can the he can work hard and achieve something. So that way that the Mr. Hamilton and the Miss Hastings has explained him that how he can achieve the things by working hard. So this way that we will come to know that the how just he is going to complete all his 12 projects. So I think this is just a story. I think hope you are all are liking this book and the three chapter we have completed. So Suman, Anjali, do you want to share about the book? So far what I have done the reading.
Yes, I think it's really a very good book that is going to teach us a lot. The first lesson that was about the work, the importance of hard work we have to do. Generally, what we have seen that rich people who leave the legacies to their children, it is found that the children don't value that much. They don't make much growth after that. So this book is a reminder or a lesson that we have to teach our children the value of hard work to earn money and other values that we might be getting in this book. Yeah, it's good. I feel that surely I'll be learning a lot from this book. Thank you.
Yeah, it's correct. So how just normally when a person leave with the very good wealth, then it is assumed that the children or son may will enjoy and they will not learn the life lessons. So that way, here that the grand uncle of Jason Steven, he is just trying to teach him the life lessons. So the way he is given the first lesson to to Jason that how just he can learn this hard work. Anjali, do you want to share?
Actually, it's a nice read, and since the format is like a story, it would be more exciting to hear. And normally, we are always taking up the learnings or the shortcom, but like in a summarized way. But this seems like we'll be able to relate somewhere with the live examples. And definitely, it has always been taught that, as Suman also pointed out, what the children get in, like after the parents leave, they realize the value of money, or they realize how hard it has been for their parents to earn that money, and the value of money, it comes only when they hold that power, and they hold that empire, if it is handed over to them all of a sudden. So it is a very like sudden thing that gets over to them, and how they learn, it has to be very thoughtful, and in a proper guidance. I really like the way in the will he has mentioned, there has to be a challenging point, or if the person doesn't follow it in that order, it would be taken away. Like the first, for the son, it will go to the trust, and for Jason, it will be like he won't get. So there is a kind of threat which is given, and that is what makes them to go through the process, and go through the learning as well, and realizing the worth of money, the hard earned money. So I'm
Yes.
enjoying the story. Actually, I'm enjoying the format after a long time. A story, a novel, that's it.
Yes, correct. So it's a complete story. So the with the small stories, the author will explain the life lessons. So that he has given all his money and wealth to his son and grandson, but they have to really earn after living. After leaving, he just will ensure that the his son and grandson earn that money. So that way he's trying, so that the he just see that the Jason who is as grandson, so he just see himself, but now just he just is not up to that level. So he is giving him his life lessons. If he will succeed, then he will get the all the wealth and all the things. So all that I can share. Rajesh ji and Mansi, that you would like to share.
Thank you, Anil. I feel like, hope I'm audible. I feel like I'm watching a movie since we started reading this book, and then the will written the expressions, whatever the authors explained about each individual, especially the Jason. I feel like I'm watching a movie. I think I can imagine what's happening. And we started with the first lesson with that work, and I'm so excited about the remaining chapters of this book. We are going to have a great learning from this book, and it's, I think, it's kind of a novel kind of book, and also building a story and expectations, curiosity, and everything is there. I'm so interested, and I like it. And also I'm so happy to see um, uh, this.
Hello.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this book. It's like going.
Yes, correct. So should we note down certain questions, or just conclude the sessions here?
For today's reading.
So if I was just it was just the only the three chapters. I was just now that they started. So I think I think we have discussed. If anyone else want to discuss anything, want to share opinion, his or her opinion, then we can further discuss. Otherwise, we can conclude.
Yeah, yeah. Shilpa, yeah, yeah. Hi, Shilpa, Shilpa, ma'am. I'm so happy to see you, ma'am, after a long time. For a while, I
Hi.
think.
Thank you. Um, yeah, I just happened to. I'm not. I am in north of India, and I have just finished a very long silent retreat. And as I was just waiting for the sun to rise here, I saw it was 7 o'clock, and I thought I could join today. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to read. I have read this book many years ago, but I don't remember the end, and it's fun reading together and going through the book together. So thank you so much.
Good to have you back. I think we are missing your presence and your thoughts about each chapters. I'm so glad having you in our meetings or in our sessions. Hope looking forward to having you in every sessions and your sharings.
Thank you, Rajesh. I just have to tell you this in advance. I will be traveling from the north back into the real world and then all the way to Mumbai. So I may not be able to attend every time. As I said, I'll be in buses and trains, and
I
so
understand this.
I'll try and attend as much as possible. Thank you.
No problem. Whenever you can, please join us.
Thank you, Silpaji. Okay, I think Rajeshji, we can conclude.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for joining this session and participating in this. Thank you.
Thank
So
Bye.
we're
you.
taking the
Thank you.
summary. Anyone is taking the summary
Uh,
or
Um,
the share or whatever.
I'm taking. I will. I'm taking it. 1 minute.
Anil, I would like to know about you. I am actually a little curious. So
So
you joined